I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast hosted by me, Erin Jane, where we have conversations about what it's like to perform a first responder role and the mental health challenges that can accompany it. Welcome back to another podcast episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I'm your host, Erin Jane, and today we have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Elise. She is coming at us live from Australia, and she's a detective sergeant with a state police force back home. Thank you for joining us, Elise.
Thank you for having me, Erin. It's an absolute pleasure. I listen to podcasts and everyone's saying, oh, it's an absolute pleasure. It really actually is an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
That's sweet of you to say. It is just the beginning of our chat, so you may revise that by the end. I'm not sure.
Who knows where we're going to land by the end of this.
Yes. So, thank you for coming on today. This is a place where, as a former police officer myself, just really a space for first responders and emergency services members just to come on, have a chat, and talk about what it's like being a first responder and also the mental health aspect of how challenging it can be and the situations and difficulties that we face at some point. So, Elise, I'd sort of just like to start off by asking, I guess, how old were you when you joined the police force and what pushed you in that direction?
I was what I like to think now is very young.
Weren't we all?
Time has gone by, as it turns out, but when I first walked through the gates of the academy, I was 21 years old, and
just a baby.
Just a baby, and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, with absolutely no concept of what the next, sitting here now, 17 and a half years would look like and where it would take me and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't have any family in the job. I didn't have anyone to sort of who'd walked the path before or who I'd seen, so I really was going in young, fresh, bright, and hopeful, I suppose.
Yes.
It was a really quick, when I graduated from high school, I was absolutely obsessed with the law and I wanted to do a law degree. I wanted to go down that path. I wanted to be in the courtroom. Mm-hmm. And leaving high school, I didn't get high enough to walk straight into law. So I did 2.5 years with an advanced diploma of justice, and which was fascinating, continued to cement my love of the law, but made me realise that perhaps the classroom and, more years of study actually wasn't for me. So somehow it came to me, why don't you join the police force? And 5 months later, I was walking through the gate. So it was a really kind of, there wasn't a lot of time to really think about, what that decision was. But, I think back now, if I had the time to think, what would that have even meant? I still had, sort of no idea.
And as well, sort of back then, I think we joined sort of similar times. I know that there was like a big push to get, I think there was a female commissioner at the time or around that time.
Yeah, there was.
And I feel like there was like a big push to get a lot of females in too.
There was. And I mean, I think the year that I joined, we were sort of doing, what we refer to as double squads every fortnight. So we had sort of 60 people every second Monday.
Every fortnight. Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. And the academy was, jam-packed with, not everyone was my age, but, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed and, a career of law enforcement ahead of them, whatever that might look like. But, I think we had 9, so out of maybe nearly 25, you're testing my memory now. I think we had about 9 in our squad. But we were a double squad, so there were probably 10 on the other side as well. So.
Okay. And And yeah, so so back then, I think yours obviously would have been the same as mine. It was about five months itself at the academy.
20 weeks, yeah. Yeah, as I remember it, 20
Yeah.
weeks. So, I went
Were
in
they
in
intense?
February and
Yeah.
walked out in July.
Mm-hmm. And I remember like we were sort of similar age when we both went in there, obviously at
Mm,
different times, but it felt very like intense, sort of, because you're just
mm.
like, where you live in or live out. I feel like it was just that really intense environment with these people all day, every day, especially if you lived in. It
It was
felt
all
not
consuming.
high schoolish, but that really just intense, the connections you form, the experiences you go through with those people.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It was all consuming. I lived in.
Okay.
So then, yeah, you united, I guess, with the other members of your squad that were there as
Hmm.
well. But
Yep.
there was a lot of pressure put
Hmm.
on. There was a lot. I mean, it's a paramilitary organization, right? So, you're dealing with people that are coming from the beginning of life, like me, with very little experience as an adult at that
Hmm.
time, and you're dealing with people that have had a life or have had
Yep.
other careers. And I guess the idea was to kind of mold us into a acceptable law enforcement officer that was
Yep.
can be professional once we walked out of those gates for the final time.
Yep. Yep. You kind of feel like a rebel while you're there, though.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It was a lot. It was a love
Yeah.
hate relationship. I think now, every time I go back, it was a love hate relationship with that
I
place.
think everyone has that feeling of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. I
That
think so too. I think so too.
like a like domestic violence kind of like relationship with the academy gates.
Oh God, those gates. Yeah. And now, I mean, now you go back for all different sorts of reasons, things that you could never comprehend. So if you're going back and walking through, for example, for police funerals, you know,
Yeah.
that was something that I could never have possibly imagined. So your relationship with it over time, I guess, changes as well. And
Yeah.
you know, the significance becomes, I don't know, something different, something rawer, perhaps.
Yeah.
When you're
That makes
saying,
sense.
when you're going there to say goodbye to colleagues,
Yeah.
who chose the same profession that you did. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting relationship, I think, with
Yeah.
that place.
Yeah, definitely. Makes sense.
Mhm.
Are you still close with anyone that you went through the academy experience with?
No, not really, actually.
Mm.
I'm much closer with people that I ended up sort of working properly with, once left the academy
Yeah.
and went to my first station.
Yeah.
One of the girls that I worked with there is still very, very good friends with. She's retired, ill health now.
Okay.
But yeah, really, really good friends with her. But
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, once we left, we all just sort of went our separate
When you
ways. I'll pass
yeah.
people from time to time,
Yeah.
and you'll be, particularly now, you'll just think, my God, I haven't seen you in nearly 20 years, wow.
Yeah. And it's
Gone by.
interesting, like the different sort of career trajectories that, everyone goes on. And then it's always really, oh, did you hear that person got a sergeant job or that person became a detective and this person's now this? And oh my God, they're such a fucking retard in the academy who
Uh,
gave them a detective job.
I know. The path that we, the different paths that we can all walk in the same organization is very interesting, and
Yeah,
the promotional system is always interesting as well. People
exactly.
could say the same about me, though. I mean, God, other members of my squad could be like, "Really? She's there?"
I highly doubt that, Elise. I highly doubt that. Though. And so once you graduated from the academy, where did you end up after that?
So, we go through the little initiation things, I suppose, of going into the city and doing, what did we do? Traffic direction, and we did driving school and all those sorts of things. I guess that's the continuation of the training, really.
Did you
Isn't
guys
it?
do
Just
the boost buses?
yes, of course. Yes, 12 weeks. 12 weeks
Oh,
on the
12?
buses.
Damn.
12. Yeah, yeah. And I just have visions of standing in the middle of well, actually, it probably wasn't the middle of the night, but I have visions of standing in very, very cold places.
Yeah.
Very, very cold. and it was a long 12 weeks, but I was with a good crew, so we were able to make the most of it, I suppose. And then I was stationed at a busy suburban police station, super busy. And once again, went in, totally blind with the best of intentions, and yeah, that was great fun. It was a lot of fun. Worked with some really good people, got some incredible jobs, some great opportunities. But I joined for the sole purpose of becoming an investigator. It was the only thing to do. Yeah. It was the only thing I wanted to do, and so I fixated on that, right from the outset. So
that's incredible to have that kind of career purpose and trajectory, like straight from the beginning. Like, what a great goal.
Yeah, it really, I don't know what it was now per se, because I was so young then, and like I said, I didn't have any yardstick, I suppose, in terms of what that even meant. But there's something about investigating evidence, the procedural fairness, natural justice, all of those sorts of things that just really kind of connect and resonate with me, and putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and that kind of problem solving in a way really is what investigating is, I suppose. So I was just fixated on that, and rightly or wrongly, I really only did sort of 2 years on the van in general duties before I was sort of swept into the secondments and sort of heading down that path.
That's really impressive.
So yes, because it was, but also, no, in a lot of ways too. What does that look like? What does grounding look like? It was incredible, but you couldn't say no, right? That was the whole thing. You couldn't say no to opportunities when they present, because you never knew. Could be 5, 6, 10 years before they came back. Back around again, and it was so competitive.
I was just about to say, especially if you're at like a busy suburban station like that, like I think I remember like when I was applying for, DRU or like divisional tasking units, like, you had to go sit panels. It was, put your application in, and there could be 5 spots and easily like 20 people vying for it.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. It was a sexy thing to be a detective then, or to start that path, or to walk that path, or, to get those temps, or, it was prestigious, and it was sought after, and it meant something. I'm not sure that now.
I was about to ask, like, because I think I was really similar. Like, you held them, especially when you're like a baby. Jesus. Especially
when you're a baby Jesus. Oh, okay. This is.
I'll even scare the shit out of me.
About
that. Oh, Jesus Christ. All right.
Nervous system possessed.
Oh, my goodness. It is an old house, so there is every chance. Oh, my goodness. Okay, sorry about that. No, we were laughing about detectives, which were way funnier.
Yes, way funnier.
I think I remember, being a young constable, and you kind of like held them in such this like high regard, and then, naturally sort of becoming one, which I know we will like get to down the track, but I guess, like, what are your thoughts about like kind of how you used to look at like that group of people back then, as to now you've been one yourself, you've worked with a lot, like, how has your vision changed?
It was really interesting, actually. The sort of spot that I was, and obviously this is my own, experience of, walking through the career that I have, and having the opportunities that I did. But they were scary. They were, for the most part, all men. There was, only one female detective at the detective office at that time. It was not something that was necessarily encouraged for women per se. But we, my experience at the time was we knew when, as uniform members, when we had done something that displeased the CI. You know, we
Yep.
were made very clear about
Yeah.
what our mistakes were and all that sort of stuff. So they, you know, early days, they were incredibly intimidating. And,
Yep.
you know, potentially if I wasn't so focused on that, well, that's the path I'm taking regardless, and that's where I want to go.
Yep.
I might have had a different a different experience. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I saw a lot of what I didn't want to be as an investigator and as a leader and as a person, really.
Yep.
There wasn't a lot necessarily that, you know, I connected with in terms of being able to model myself off somebody more senior necessarily.
Yep.
You know, like it just it's much different now.
Yep.
But yeah, back then it was they were a lot. They were scary. They were, you know, and you held them. They had it, you know, they
Yeah.
had such
And back then too as well, like I think that there were a lot more of the, I mean, if I'm going to say old and crusty, it probably sounds a little mean, but like that kind of like the old guard, the really old school coppers, especially men, you know, probably joined in the 80s, like in the 90s when the police force was very different. They'd been around a long time, seen a lot. And, you know, like I think it was very much a different time and they were different people. And yeah, like having a, you know, young little uppity redhead bounce into their office being like, hi guys, you know, it might have been a little bit of a shock to their system.
quite
But,
possibly.
but
I never
it's
really
really,
considered it from their perspective.
we never do.
What it must have looked like. Hello, you.
but what, like the one thing that you did say, which is really interesting that I, you know, definitely think I sort of found along the way too was, and not just necessarily about like detectives, but, you know, learning on the job. Sometimes it's, you think that you're going to find a mentor and they're going to show you the ropes and, you know, you're going to learn so much. And sometimes you're fortunate enough that happens. But equally, I feel like in my career, I also came across so many people that were such shining examples of what not to be, what not to do, how not to act, like just fucking just, you know, you dreaded shifts being rostered with them because you were just like, either A, I don't trust you, or B, I think you're going to fuck it up, or C, I don't think you know, you might be like senior to me, but I don't think you're good at your job. And it's challenging being in that situation, but very much a good, from what I always found, like a really good learning aspect to go, okay, I know that I don't want to be like you. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I think the way that they engaged with their uniform at that time was very much something that I didn't ever want to make someone feel that way. I didn't ever want to make someone, you know, because I knew I didn't make mistakes or poor decisions because I was incompetent or, you know, I made those decisions because I was so inexperienced and I needed that encouragement. So I didn't need to be told I was a fucking idiot. And I didn't need to be told, oh, I hope the house isn't in your name because, you know, when they come and fucking sue you. Well, that was unhelpful for me.
Yeah.
So moving forward as a leader now, you know, and being much more experienced in the job, it's unhelpful for people to feel like, you know, you've just stepped on them. So it's much more, for me, it's more important to empower people to understand the decision making, you know, to talk through to like, okay, well, let's campfire this, let's sit around and, you know, what are our options, that sort of stuff. So, you know, we can say that it was a different time. And it was what we didn't want to be. But, you know, by the same token, it sort of made us who we are in a lot of ways as well. Like I think you're not in the organisation anymore, but, you know, certainly when we worked together, you know, we had a very different, and we worked in an office that was not necessarily aligned with that perspective, lifting people up, bringing people along, empowering people, all that sort of stuff. But then, like you say, that organization, that was kind of point in the organization where there's pale, stale males. How am I going? There's that different generation. And I feel like at the time that we joined, there was a real changing of the guard almost in terms of the type of, be that culturally, socially, whatever that looks like, that generation. There's so many different kind of factors, I think.
Do you think the first female commissioner, do you think that had sort of something to do with it in a sense, or you just think it was more females joining the job, or what do you think?
I'm not sure I know that I can put it down to any one thing. I mean, the organisation and the state police forces cop so much criticism, and we haven't always done things right. We haven't always done things well. And so change is often necessary. What that change looks like, whether it means you're bringing in new people, whether it means, the kind of the older, where they're retiring so naturally, there's going to be different, and a different growth that's coming through. But I don't know that I don't know if I can associate it to, in my own, it probably did. She probably did have something to do with it. But in my lived experience, I wasn't necessarily aware. Of, do you know what I mean? Like, I was sort of in
what it was prior.
My level, sort of feeling what was happening down in the weeds, I suppose. So I wasn't ever really aware of what was happening further up the tree.
No, that makes sense. And so you said you basically sort of a couple of years on the van, and then, started. So did you just do secondments and temps, or what did that process look like for you to head towards getting an investigator's position?
Yeah, so it was a secondment position for about 15 months. And, the person that I modelled myself off, or ended up modelling myself off, then is now one of my very best friends. She, she's the best investigator I'd ever worked with, best police officer I'd ever worked with. And she came to the police station a couple of years into my being there, and we ended up doing the assignment at the detective's office together. And, she's just fabulous, fearless. She was just such a great role model for me. So we both did the 15 months. She was senior to me by maybe 10 or 12 years, and she ultimately got a detective position in a different office. And then subsequently, at the end of my 15 months secondment, I followed along. So I think I went back to uniform on the van for about 6 weeks or something, maybe. While I sort of sat that board, got that job, got appealed, and then ultimately secured or held my position. It's the person that appealed me ultimately, I think they got a different job or something, so we didn't have to go through that process. But so then I was a detective 5 years in, I think it was, in the end, maybe. 5 years.
And so was that at a like a suburban?
Another suburban. Not far from where I'd done my temps. Also another incredibly busy police station, incredibly busy detective's office. But it was almost like the socio cultural demographic of where I ended up getting my first detective spot was very different to where I'd kind of had that, basic policing experience. So, for me, it was a little bit like kind of getting into a spaceship and, landing somewhere completely different, because then there was a whole nother set of skills, whole nother learning experience, baptism by fire. But, that is what it is. And that, that was a great period in time as well.
And how long did you spend there?
I spent a couple of years there, and then I got the opportunity to go into the squads in
Okay.
town.
Yeah. Which is where
So
we met.
yeah, which is where we met. Yes, yes. Then I seem to think, yeah, all up it was about 4.5 or 5 years that I did in the squads. The bits and pieces,
Yes.
high profile, and that was, that was different again. You
Yeah.
went from being in a regional office where there was a real sense of camaraderie and a real sense of team, and then moving into, this building just full of detectives, and the feeling was very different to being at a suburban detective's office. And somehow suddenly felt that you weren't necessarily on the same side, which was really interesting and a bit unexpected, because we were still all doing the same job, but it became very competitive, unexpected.
Are you talking in terms of like competitiveness in amongst our squad or in amongst like the crime department itself?
I think probably both. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I feel like there was a bit of a hierarchical system. Well, it's a police force, so there is a hierarchical system.
I wasn't going to say it, but
maybe that's obvious. But no, it felt like within the one squad that, there was a who's the best sort of a thing. Be the best, who's the best, who's doing it.
And that seems to be fueled by certain personalities there, I feel.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I don't know if sort of you felt the same. Like I felt there was I would say a decent level of camaraderie amongst like the troops. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. There was. And sometimes healthy competition is good, right?
Yeah, this is true.
It makes us all better.
Yeah.
But it was different.
Yeah. And so for anyone listening, when Elise and I worked together, our purview was we used to investigate armed robberies, kidnappings, non-fatal shootings, and I want to say aggravated burglaries. So I think that got taken away from us at some point.
Yeah, if there was the firearm and the non-fatal shooting side of things involved.
Yeah. But
depending on what the result was.
Exactly. That one gets shoved over one line. It's the homies job. But so how did you, coming from being in like a divisional CI where, would have like a certain, I guess, level of, like dynamic activity. But, like I definitely found where we worked in town at the crime department to be a very dynamic environment. You could walk in the morning and see that lovely red sign on the door notifying you that there was a kidnapping in process, and to go to the kind of command center type room that we used to operate out of. Talk to me about like the differences and how you find it, and whether you like had a preference or.
Well, it was incredibly, dynamic is right. And I suppose we had ended up and chosen to be in an office with a crime theme that didn't really operate in business hours. The types of crimes that were, and that crime theme, it wasn't a 9 to 5 daylight, at that time. And so, we did incredibly long hours, and, we would often come in and if you didn't get your coffee on the way in sort of a thing, well, it wasn't coming until, who knows what, exactly. So, and it was a fabulous, it was another fabulous thing again. I suppose as you change offices and, as you move through, like, change can be scary sometimes, or we can overestimate change in our heads, or we can think, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But, the more often you do it, it's not so bad and it's not so
Yeah.
scary, but there is still that period of just being completely out of water and
Yeah.
completely out of your depth, or, whichever way you want to look at it.
Yeah.
So,
Sometimes if
going
you're
from,
like a duck and you're like paddling like
yeah,
fuck, like under the surface,
yeah,
but everything looks calm
and
on top.
exactly. And you go from being, a sort of a leader in the suburbs to
Yeah.
almost taking a step back and almost going back, kind of going back a rank,
Yeah.
into town and going into the squads, because things are so much more high profile, or, they attract so much more attention more regularly. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of scrutiny and, sort of eyes looking in on you, I
And
guess.
that
Um,
actually is like a really interesting take on it because, yeah, like I feel like, in a divisional CI, you kind of end up having like a little bit more autonomy in terms of what you're doing, and you just go out and you get your shit done. Whereas in the squads, because you work on like a crew dynamic where you have like a detective sergeant and anywhere from sort of 3 to 6 troops if you were lucky, probably average.
yeah,
I would
depending.
say average like 4, maybe 5 sort of thing. That everything
Yeah.
is kind of that bit of a like a group decision and a team decision, and then like it is kind of, especially coming from where you came from, that would probably like, did you find it sort of like challenging to kind of have to be like, oh, I feel like I have to like almost ask permission to do stuff again? Or
Yeah. Yeah, you sort of start to second guess yourself in a little bit of a way, because, you were making really sound judgments, with no sort of, the uniform were looking to you
yeah,
as the leaders, in the field and that sort of
yeah,
stuff. And you come in, come into the squads, and it doesn't feel quite, initially, you default into that decision making.
yeah,
But it's not up to you.
yeah,
It goes sort of further up the train, and your inspectors are unseen, and all that sort of stuff. So it was a
yeah,
very different, very, very different dynamic to the previous couple of years. But
mm-hmm.
I had the most amazing investigations,
Yeah,
challenging, really working with so many different investigative techniques, and
yeah,
all that sort of stuff. So it opened
mm,
your world and your toolbox in a lot of ways to something completely
yeah. Because
completely different.
I was thinking like access to like additional services, I think is a little easier and a little more free flowing kind of working in the
Mm.
squads compared to, like the friends I have who still like work out in like a divisional CI that, they're asking for, kind of dollars and cents to be spent on little bits and pieces that we were fortunate that it was just kind of wasn't even like a thought that like we need X service to, facilitate us being able to investigate this crime or this job a little more, accurately, and competently. And it was just very easily granted, or wasn't even a question.
Yeah, it felt that yeah, the reins weren't necessarily as tight per se, but
Yeah.
but that said, I guess well, it's hard, isn't it, when when you're looking at it from that perspective, and I feel like how do we determine one person's lived experience of
Yeah.
crime, particularly a crime against the person,
Mm.
over others. But that's something that's decided much much further up the tree. But it
Yeah,
is,
this is true.
sometimes it is. You're dealing with people at their point in crisis, and sometimes their biggest crisis.
Yeah,
You just got to work with what you've got sometimes, don't you?
exactly.
Find the evidence, look for what's there, and hopefully bring about some peace in their life, or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Hopefully bring something.
And so sort of from what you're saying, it sounds like you found your position there very important and impactful in, maybe in terms of um, being like an advocate for your victims and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was interesting. Certainly, you know, like I say, we had some fabulous jobs, but when I say that people don't necessarily, you know, that the jobs aren't coming in business hours, by the same token,
There isn't always a perfect victim.
there's a certain cohort of victims where they choose a certain lifestyle that comes with a certain level of risk. And so they're not always welcoming of the police to provide assistance, or they're not interested in the assistance, whatever that looks like. So while the investigations were fabulous, it was very difficult to connect, you know, because they play a role in their lives, and you know, they make certain choices, and it's difficult to follow through sometimes.
That makes sense. So
they're not interested.
Some days you feel like you're making a difference, and other days you feel like you're bashing your head up against a brick wall.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. But, you know, but that said, like, got a great opportunity to go around and see different parts of the state, and, you know, like, there's all sorts of, it depends what you feel, but there's all sorts of different things that, you know, it was a great 4.5 years or whatever it was in the end. It was too much for me, for example. I probably should have left earlier than I did.
I think so.
You know, just the work and all that sort of stuff. I realised probably far too late that I'd burnt out there. And so eventually I moved into a different crime theme. But yeah, probably realised I was burnt out about 6 months about 6 months too late.
But you know what? The realization came, so I feel like that is important.
It did, yeah. So in the meantime, I was, you know, I could feel myself becoming something that wasn't me, that didn't feel authentic, you know, I could just hear the negativity in my voice and I couldn't stop it. You know, it was just became this overwhelming sense of negativity for me, which is very, just not who I am. It's not what I'm about. And I, you know, started to hate myself for it. So eventually, I was able to recognize it for what it was. And move somewhere else.
So talk to me about that. Talk to me about, after moving on from the squads, where you're at now.
Yeah, so now I've moved. So after moving on from there, I've really spent a lot of time, spent the last however many years that is now, in some way connected to family violence, and some way connected to victims of family violence, apart from a little moment where I, you know, sort of went into the courtroom and thought, you know, maybe I'll prosecute for a little while.
I just remembered that, honestly. And then it took me back to you saying about how you wanted to be a lawyer. And then, oh my God, like all of the things are colliding in my head right now.
A little bit. Yeah. Because I love the courtroom, right? But I was getting to a point at about, what was it then, maybe 12 or 14 years. And there was so much pressure coming down about, okay, well, now you need to go and be a sergeant, and now you need to go and do this. You know, like there was a lot. I was suddenly feeling, once I'd recovered from the burnout, there was suddenly this pressure that, okay, now the status quo is over there. And so you need to, you know, you need to go, and there are certain things you need to tick off. You need to go back to uniform. You need to be a sergeant. You need to. There's all these, you know, there's all these sort of constructs that we put on each other. And I didn't want to do any of that. I still loved, with all my heart, I loved investigating, you know, victim survivors of family violence were just, you know, it's just a crime theme that speaks to me like sort of nothing else has. You know, the choice of lifestyle, or the choices that victim survivors make, is incredibly different to what I'd, you know, previously been in for the past 4.5 years. You know, the worst thing they did was fall in love with someone, and as a result of that, their home became an unsafe place for them to be. And, you know, all of the psychology that sits around that offending. And, you know, the courage that it takes for victim survivors to come forward, or to speak up, or to, you know, to get out in any way, all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff, counterintuitive victim behaviors. Like there's so much that sits around it. And it's just something that really connects for me. So apart from my little moment in time where I was feeling that pressure of, okay, well, all right, yes, yeah, okay, well, you're telling me I have to go and, be a sergeant, but I'm not really down with that per se. I'll accept that perhaps I am a little bit one-dimensional, so I'll go over here, I'll sit in the courtroom for a little while and I'll diversify my skills. And my God, it is, well, for me, it was I love the courtroom.
Yeah.
I love going in and giving evidence. I love, being able to put a product together and take it into court and say, all right, well, let's see where we are with this. What does this look like? But to sit at a bar table, holy moly, for me, it was the loneliest place on earth.
Really?
Particularly having been for so many years, having been in such team-oriented environments. Yeah. Oh, God, it was it was really interesting. It's really interesting, really unexpected.
Yeah.
So I did that for 11 months.
So you didn't feel like there was any sense of camaraderie in the prosecution's office, or was it more just the fact that, every day you leave your office and sit in a courtroom and it wasn't like you had a partner there to be talking with or anything? It was just you and defense counsel and the magistrate.
Yeah, that's what exactly it was. You spend so much time, I've gone from spending effectively all the time in the office or out on the road, or, you're talking through things, working out what, as detectives, we just constantly campfire stuff.
Yeah.
We're constantly, what's it, where does this, what is it, how does this evidence connect?
I love that term. I want to feel that. I want to, let's campfire this. I love that. I don't think I've heard that before. I absolutely love it.
It's what we constantly do. We're always brainstorming. We're always, just always tossing up ideas. And the conversations are so interesting for me. Talking about the law and talking about evidence and how does that apply and what does that mean? And, just kind of looking through and interrogating everything. And then you go into the courtroom and you sit at a bar table by yourself. This, again, my lived experience, how I felt.
Yeah.
I've got a product before me that I've had nothing to do with.
Yeah.
And it may or may not be a good quality product, and I may or may not be able to do something with it. Do you know what I mean? And then over a period of time, the lonelier it got at the bar table, the more desperately I missed victims, and I missed just being able to meet them and take them and walk with them through the process.
Yeah.
Regardless of where we ended up, not necessarily, getting into the courtroom and getting a fabulous result, but just being able to empower them in a different way and just, you know what, let's do this together. It's not like that from the bar table. Not for me anyway.
Yeah. No, and that definitely would have been challenging. And I feel like as well, you are, you're a very articulate person, and from my experience of working with you, you kind of cross all your T's, you dot all your I's, you would go to the effort to make sure that, say, when you were presenting a brief of evidence, you knew all the ducks were lined up in a row, whereas I don't feel like you necessarily would have been given the same quality all the time when you were a prosecutor.
Yes, rightly or wrongly. I mean, my expectations are incredibly high, reasonably or not. I do, I have incredibly high expectations, and I expect a certain level of myself that, sometimes, I expect the same of others, and I'm not necessarily certain that is always fair. As I've sort of grown through the organisation, I think, well, what I am and what I look for is not necessarily fair to place all of that onto the shoulders of others. But it's certainly difficult when the law is what it is and the evidence is what it is, and if you don't give something the best chance of success, how do you find it?
Yeah. I'm what's the point? You're kind of wasting everyone's time then.
Yeah, it's interesting. But you know, it's just all those sorts of experiences, I suppose. We
Yeah.
like our organization offers us so many different little doorways.
Niches and yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, I'll close that. I'll go somewhere else. And yeah, consequently, I found my way back to family violence, which is just made for me.
Yeah. Is there sort of a reason that it resonates with you so strongly and like so fiercely? Because, like when you talk about it, like you can hear the passion in your voice of how, how strongly you really feel about, advocating for those victims, and you definitely come across with like that level of understanding about how, I guess, challenging, like it's not just black and white, it's like, oh, why didn't she just leave him? Why didn't this? Why didn't that? And the way that you talk about it, like you have such a clear understanding of the messiness that I guess would be involved in that, side of work.
Yeah, I think it's it's like I say, it's a crime theme that shouldn't necessarily be there simply because somebody chose to commence a relationship with another person, or you know um, our human need and our human connection to be with others, and
Mm-hmm.
to be in love, and all of the significance that we give being together in that sense. And
Mm-hmm.
then for whatever reason, lived experience as a child, or childhood trauma, or whatever it is that gets two people together, and
Yeah.
then suddenly the home is
Not a
it's
safe
not.
place.
It's like Jess Hill's book, See What You Made Me Do. It's not the monsters lurking in the dark that women should fear, but the men they fall in love with. And so there's something really haunting about that for me. And then once they've, and that's a very gendered quote, can I say? So it's
Yeah.
obviously, the vast majority of statistics, and overwhelmingly the victim survivors are women and children, but it is absolutely not
Yeah. Of
gendered.
course.
It family violence does not discriminate. I think that's the other, and there's so much pressure put on victim survivors to, like you say, why did she leave? Why did they stay? And where is the accountability? Like, why is the accountability on the victim and not on the
Yeah. Always
perpetrator? And
on. Yeah.
all of that sort of stuff. Yeah. So there's just something about it that if you can't feel safe in your own home,
Yeah.
that is really something that sort of resonates with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just have so much empathy as an investigator. I
Mm-hmm.
feel things incredibly acutely.
Yeah.
And it just I'm able, it's something that I'm able to offer them, or I can engage with them, or, it's just something that absolutely fascinates me. It's such an insidious crime.
Yeah.
Um, it's just something that I just love to
Yeah.
investigate, love to be a part of, love to learn more about. There's so many dynamics, the counterintuitive victim behavior, the coercive control. It's
Mm.
just,
Yeah.
the
And
rabbit
and I
hole is,
think it's, sorry, I interrupted.
the rabbit hole is endless.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting too, because it's not like it's a new theme. I
No.
think it's always been in the underbelly of society, but it's just something that actually gets spoken about now.
Mm.
Like I think, and even, I remember talking to other like members, in uniform when I joined, and I think it was probably around our vintage, maybe, that like the family violence, what word am I searching for? Like dynamics and policies changed within the organization, and we attending a scene were actually expected to take certain steps regardless of whether the quote unquote domestic violence victim wanted us to or not, but it was like our duty of care to provide some level of safety or intervention for them or on their behalf. Whereas, you know, in years gone by, it was just kind of like, you know, let's drop him at the, you know, the pub, or let's, you know, we'll take you and the kids to your mum's, like, doesn't, you know, we'll just forget the fact that he just belted you, but we'll just kind of separate everyone for the evening and just kind of like hope that everything's fine again tomorrow. And it was seemingly just like swept under the carpet. And from my recollection, it was just increased, you know, rates of basically domestic violence victims getting either seriously hurt and or murdered by their partners, where it was actually like, this probably needs to change.
Yeah, that's right. I think at the moment, well, some of the latest statistics are, you know, we're going to 80,000 family violence related jobs a year, you know, already. What are we?
Just in that state, just in your state.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, for Australia, we're at 43 domestic, you know, women killed as a result of domestic violence and that sort of stuff. So,
God,
you know, the significant indicators, the risk that, you know, how can it be that potentially by falling in love with someone, you're potentially choosing a fate, you know.
yeah.
There's just so many things to it, and we haven't always done it well, and it's still incredibly taboo. I think there's statistics recently where, you know, 43% of Australians or something like that still believe that family violence doesn't really happen, that doesn't happen in their town, or, you know, like, it's just something that we've come so far, but we still have such a long way to go. And, you know, the only people that are being impacted, victim survivors and their children. And if we, you know, and the children grow up to be potentially victim survivors or perpetrators themselves, and, you know, what does that look like? It's just so much. So for me, I don't know, it's not sexy for everyone. And, you know, if you let me talk about it, I'll talk about it for weeks. And I watch, you know, at work, you know, if I get on some sort of rant, you know, I watch my boss and my colleagues just go, oh God, here she goes again. She's off. She's off talking about.
I missed your rants, Elise. They were always good fun.
There she goes again talking about family violence. You know, but it's not for everyone, but it's absolutely definitely for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it gives me a sense of purpose and a connection to work, and, you know, all of the things that we don't always find necessarily.
No, and especially, you know, it sounds like after realizing that you were burnt out, to have gone somewhere else and sort of, you know, seemingly refound your joy for the job. You know, it sounds like that's been incredibly important and you know, worthy for you to have somewhere like to put your passion into.
Yeah, I think that's true. You know, I think that we all have so many different skills, you know, across 17 or 18,000 members or whatever it is, you know, and then across the country as a whole. Yeah, you know, we're all made for different things, and we you know, we need each and every one. We need people that are, you know, passionate about road policing and highway patrol, and we need people that are passionate about family violence survivors, and we need, you know, we just need all of the things to be effective, I think. And so, if people, you know, where you find your strengths and where you find your connection, and that gives you a reason to get up and out of bed. Yeah. That's probably a good thing, I would have thought.
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess before we sort of go into talking about the mental health within, you know, the organization, is there, and this is going to be a tough question, so if there isn't one, that's okay, but like you're saying, after, you know, 17 and a half years in, is there any job, either good or bad, that really sticks out in your mind, that is kind of like either what's, you know, funniest thing that happened on a job, what's you know, was something really heartbreaking? What was something really uplifting? Obviously, without, you know, breaching any kind of confidentiality. Is there anything that like sticks out in your mind at all?
Talk about a question without notice. I mean, there's so much, right?
I know, sorry.
Jesus, that's such a loaded question. There's so many different questions. Holy hell. Um, there's there's so many different things, you know,
Yeah.
that stand out. And I think, you know, part of what potentially put me on this, on my career path in terms of, you know, being in the family violence space was being a very, very young constable and going to the scene of a family violence related aggravated burglary, you know, where he'd set it up. He'd been to the house earlier to drop the children back to their mum. You know, he'd unlocked a window at the rear of the house where there was renovations, and in the middle of the night he came back in, and she woke up to, you know, his hands around her throat and the children at the door banging and screaming because he'd locked the master bedroom door, you know. And I just remember being so young in the job and not knowing, you know, what to do necessarily, and looking to my senior members to help me. And, you know, although it was ultimately, you know, a good result moving forward, there were plenty of things that I would do differently now, you know, now that I know better, that I know more. But that was, you know, it was one of those things where the CI came to me and said, I hope you don't have any assets in your name. You know, why they were coming to the 3-month-old Connie and not the 20-year veteran, I'm not sure. But, you know, that has always, there are so many aspects of that job that has always stood out in my mind. You know, and then I think just anywhere that there's a vulnerable victim, or any, you know, there was another job one day we just happened over where this woman was about to chuck a 3-year-old over a fence, you know, and we just happened to be there at the right time and were able to stop all of that happening. And, you know, the way that child clung to me, you know, for the hours afterwards that we were sort of going to the hospital and doing all that sort of stuff while, you know, the child protection services and everything came in, you know, that sits with me years later. You know, found out that child had perished in a boating accident. And, you know, there's all of these sorts of things that kind of carry with you. You know, I think I've had a great deal of fun. I've worked with some amazing people. You know, I think I've been incredibly lucky to have great team members that I've worked with, and I really haven't had the exposure to traumatic events that a lot of other members have. If anything, I actually somehow I managed to nullify the shit magnets in the world. You know, I don't know how to do that, but, you know, I've had 5 bodies this week. Oh, okay. Well, I haven't had 5 this year, so you know, we'll go out on patrol together this, you know, many years ago, and nothing would happen, and they couldn't believe it. And I was like, oh yeah, this is situation normal. But, you know, there's so much, you know, if you were to sit and think about everything over the journey, and, you know, that's just me in 17 years.
No, I mean, that story
it.
about that, you know, domestic violence Agberg, I mean, it really speaks to, you know, that clearly sort of shaped you really early on in your career, and it speaks
I always
volumes
think back to
it. Yeah, and it speaks volumes as to why you've gone in that direction. 100%. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. So you just said that, you know, thankfully you are not a shit magnet, which is always nice to the people who aren't. I want to talk about mental health in the capacity of the organisation and police force that you work for. And I guess if you can sort of cast your mind back to when you joined, do you remember, like, you know, whether it was anything that was ever broached or talked about, or, you know, was anything ever mentioned about, you know, your mental health or welfare or anything like that you can think of?
No, no, I have no memory of mental health being any sort of anything. What I
Yeah.
remember mostly, and what I think back to a lot now, is something they would say to us. And I'm sure it was, if it wasn't the first day, it was inside the first week. You know,
Yeah.
you have tickets to the greatest show on earth. You know, it was this celebration. You know, I don't know if they said that to you, but I
I know,
remember
that's
those.
why I'm smiling, because like legit exactly like whoever gave that speech at the academy was, just reading off the same notes. Like, yeah. And I
Yeah,
think you
and I
posted
cannot.
something about it recently, and
Yes,
I
I
didn't
did.
remember
I
it
did.
until I read it, and I was like, holy shit, like I remember them saying that to me on my first day or first week or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and it spoke to me then, right? Oh my God, front row tickets to the greatest show on earth. Oh, that sounds
Yeah.
incredible. Oh my God, the things we're going to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, the things we're going to see. At what cost?
Yeah.
And that was that was the part of the conversation that was silent. That was the part of the conversation that I never asked myself. Yes, we are going to see the most incredible things. We are going to see the most traumatic events, people in crisis. Like no one's coming to us generally with a fluffy duck or a little puppy. Those moments are rare. We are going to people in crisis, at accidents, intentional harm, whatever that looks like. Yes, they are the greatest seats on earth to the greatest show.
Yeah. The
But
depths of humanity.
yeah, but how does that then connect to our mental health? What does that mean? What are the costs? And
Yeah.
ultimately, we pay for those seats with our mental health. We pay
Yeah.
for those seats with our emotional, our emotional health and our physical health and
Mm-hmm.
all of the things.
Yeah.
As the years go by, those seats start to take an incredible toll
Mm-hmm.
on who we are as
Yeah.
people and who we are as humans and how we show up in the world, be
Yeah.
that at work, be that at home, be that wherever.
Yeah.
It starts to just all intrinsically connect. And so, yeah, that's my memory, that there was nothing. In
Yeah.
fact, it was made shiny. It was
Mm.
made to be something to be celebrated. And
Yeah.
as a result, it took years to
Yeah.
actually understand what toll policing, law enforcement, and it's first responder, like it's not just,
Yeah.
but the toll that it has.
Yeah.
If you don't actively, or even if you do, it's just the awareness around trying to maintain that resilience in the face of such events it's really challenging when
Yeah.
we're not, it might be different now. And we are having more conversations around mental health now, but
Mm-hmm.
our vintages and before and even a little bit after, we weren't given any skills, I don't think, to cope.
No. No. And you obviously sort of kindly already shared and talked about like the fact that you recognized you were in burnout, simply because you felt like you were turning into a person that you didn't want to be and didn't like, and knew that deep down that you weren't. And so the thing that was causing that was everything, the build up and the stress and everything that was going on, for you at work.
Yeah, I got to a point that I hated myself, and that was a really unique feeling for me. And the fact that I couldn't articulate positivity was something as well that was like, okay, something is seriously wrong here, because this is
Yeah.
not you, and I was just, I just hated the way I was interacting with my colleagues. And and like I say, it took 6 months. I couldn't identify what that was for a long
Yeah.
time. But once I did, yeah, I and nobody there was nobody there to tell me, hey Elise, maybe you've been here too long, or
Or even
okay, I
just
know
like,
what this
hey
is because
Elise,
I've been
are
here
you
before.
okay?
Well, yeah, yeah, but that wasn't something, that question, that language wasn't something to be celebrated or to be broached or anything like that, because it's for so long it
Yeah.
symbolized weakness. What if I wasn't okay? Oh, well, it must be weak. You must be falling apart. We must need to get rid of you. Well, no, it
Yeah.
doesn't look like that. That's not. I'm
Or,
just.
you're a female and you can't cope and
so many nuances, none of them are what we should focus on. It just means that I'm having a very human reaction and a very normal reaction to trauma or traumatic events or stress or overwhelm or normal, very normal.
Yes, 100%, very fucking normal. And I guess so, how did you, if you don't mind sharing, like, besides leaving that position, how did you heal yourself? Was it simply just leaving, or did you have to do more?
It was, I think once I got to about the 10-year mark, it became very obvious to me that this job would break me if I let it, and this job would break me even if I didn't let it, sort of a thing. It really had that capacity for so much harm. But that wasn't, it was something that sort of came with time, that awareness. Mm-hmm. So I have always kind of really focused proactively on trying to keep ahead, on trying to, maintain some sense of balance. Now, for me, in my world, I came to yoga and Tai Chi very young in life. Okay. Dad was a Tai Chi teacher. Mum did yoga, So they taught my sister and I all, different sun salutations and different Tai Chi moves and all that sort of stuff. And, so that's been something that I've carried and had access to wherever I am. Sort of for most of my life, and I learned sort of meditation and over the journey as well. So all of those sorts of things, I like getting out and going for a walk. I hate the gym. I hate running. It's not for me. It's gross. I don't understand it. I know you love it, but for me, I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop that now.
It's gross, she says.
Can't we just sit and breathe on our yoga mats? Let's
regulate whatever works.
No, but it's those sorts of things, I sort of, I recognize what feels good in my body. I notice, randomly, strangely, I notice sunsets, I notice sunrise, I notice, I notice things that, and all of those things, I think sometimes going for walks and whatever else, it's all stuff that begins to resonate with me. Mm-hmm. My identity is not solely tied to my employment, like I have seen it with a lot of other people, and I think that was part of it as well. Growing up, moving through the job, all people had was
the job.
Freddie. All people had was they were solely aligned, their sole identity, and so I began to recognize consciously or subconsciously that was a really dangerous thing, because when you stepped away, whether you chose to or whether you were forced to, what did you have? Yeah. So I've deliberately, maintained relationships that don't connect, or aren't solely reliant on what we do. I mean, how terrible are we, coppers? We get together and all we talk about are war stories, or, like, where are we in that?
Yeah.
So I think, you and I live on opposite sides of the world, but, we've maintained an incredible relationship.
100%.
Right. So all of the friendships like that, I think, all of that stuff, just being able to invest parts of yourself that are outside your profession is, and then doing all the other things. Like for me, that, I don't know, that's how I think I stay afloat. It's not always, I cry a lot. Like a lot. But for me, okay, well, we'll just turn the valve on for a little minute. It's just release.
If that's healthy, then, and if that's what works for you, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. The news. Oh God. Oh my God. There are things I just can't watch. But anyway, but I think it all goes towards just kind of regulating that sort of nervous system response, because we're so, by the very nature of our professions, we're so hypervigilant. So being able to offer something else.
Mm-hmm. And I think from an outsider's perspective, I want to say we've probably known each other for about 10 years now. And from someone who met you obviously, you know, partway through your career, like you always seem to have like a really rich life, like outside of the job. Like, you know, and like, you like did some kind of dancing thing for a while. I remember. I can't remember what the style
also
was.
dancing.
Yeah.
Yes.
But, you know, so you've always had these things outside the job that really seem to bring you like a lot of joy. And I always
Yeah.
found that really, you know, inspiring because like you were saying, like it's so, and I think we both know those people, regardless of whether you're a police officer, a firefighter, or a paramedic, like I don't know if it happens as much with like EMTs or paramedics as, you know, as much as I feel like with cops and fireys. It's such a descriptive job and it's so visible, and there is such like the camaraderie that can occur that then it's so easy to just get drawn into that world and forget that it's really healthy to have something outside of it. And yeah, like you know, I know like
Well, our conditioning, I don't know that necessarily we were encouraged to have anything outside. You know, if you think early openers,
yeah,
you know,
true.
different
Night shift
turns of
drinks.
night shift drinks. I'm not necessarily certain, not that it was something like you can't do anything else, but in terms of just that really silent conditioning and that kind of occupational narrative, per se,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
work
an
hard,
interesting
play
point.
hard. I don't know. I wonder, and I think that's sometimes how it's easy to get kind of consumed and caught up, is that that narrative is so loud, even though it's even as subtle as it is.
Mm,
There's something
yeah,
really deafening about the way that we should be, the way that we
yeah,
should engage.
yeah. No, that's an interesting take, and I do know, you know, obviously as someone who has left the job, it um it is odd to step away when even if you don't solely define yourself by that role, when you don't have it to define yourself by anymore, it is challenging. Like it's
Mm.
very and look at, you know, I think my circumstances were different because not only did I stop doing the job, the only job that I ever thought that I would do, but then I also got married and moved countries, and there was like a whole lot involved. So I think I lost like a lot of my identity overall because of all of the circumstances and like the dynamic involved. But it is, and you know, like still, you know, I get asked like all the time, like, do you miss it? Do you miss being a cop? Do you, I mean, I get probably asked that just as much as I get asked about, do I miss home and do I wish I was still there? And may I
Yeah.
say, hearing the Aussie birds in the background has been lovely during this conversation. So I greatly have appreciated that. But you know, like I can honestly say that I don't think that I miss the job. Like I would miss aspects of it, you know, and like we talked about the fun and like the dynamic nature of, you know, working at, you know, the squads like we did. Like I loved that period of my life, but I'm now a mum of two kids. I'm like, that would not work for me anymore.
Yeah.
So
It's just,
I think I can miss it in terms of, you know, some sense like that. But honestly, it's really more just people, you know, like and the people that have really become important and pivotal in my life, or I'm still in contact with them. Like, you know, this is the reality and the evidence of that the people who mattered, you know, you stay in contact with. And because the same thing goes, like you make these great friends at your, you know, whatever station or crew or squad you're working at, and then one of you moves and one of you moves somewhere else, and that unity gets broken up really easily. And as much as you think that you're going to keep in contact, like it doesn't always work like that.
it's true. The best of intentions, life just doesn't happen that way. But I mean, that's part of needing to be deliberate and needing to be intentional. you know,
Yeah.
and like holding on to someone and saying, no, you're my person.
Yeah.
And, oh, you're in, you know, you're on the other side of the world. Okay, well, I'm still going to hold you.
I appreciate that.
it may not, you know, like you do though. You have to.
Yeah.
I think that's true of life though, not necessarily just the first responder world, but you know,
Yeah.
certainly in terms of mental health, holding people and being deliberate about wanting people in your life, you know, that bring value, that bring joy, that, you know, that bring all of the things that are needed to be human and to balance out what it is that
Yeah.
we see day to
Yeah.
day. You know, it's just one aspect. It's hard
Yeah.
though, you know, I think
Yeah.
not just expect friendships to happen. We
No,
can't just expect relationships to exist. They
it takes work and effort
they
and
require work.
yeah.
Yeah. But
I
if
mean,
it's meaningful,
yeah, 100%. And I think there is something to be said, not just for being friends with, you know, people in that realm or that profession, but I think sometimes we understand each other in a way
mm,
that sometimes others don't, and it's not meant in like a dish exclusive or excluding kind of manner, but you know, like for you or I to be able to talk to each other and to be like, oh yeah, like I got this job, you know, you don't necessarily have to go into detail, like you're going to get it. And I feel like there's that warmth that is involved in friendships where you know, emergency services, first responders, like whatever, anyone in that realm, like I feel like there's something really really special and unique in that
mm,
sense, and that level
absolutely.
of insight and understanding when sometimes you don't even have to speak the words and they just know.
Yeah, correct. We see a side of life that most people never will,
Yeah.
and we see it regularly. And yeah, I think there is something about that inherent understanding. Those words, "I've had a shit fucking day," probably don't need much more explanation.
No,
You know,
like
oh, you
how
had a
big
shit
how
fucking
big a wine glass
day.
do you want, babe?
Yeah.
That's
Oh, the
like
bottle. Oh, the
that's
case.
a
Okay, sure.
really
You
big
know,
one.
exactly
Exactly.
right. But no, there is something. We have a very specific, a very unique lens that we see the world through.
Mhm.
And if we're not careful, it taints our worldview, and
Yeah.
it taints how we see everything. And I think that feeds into the mental health as well.
Yeah.
Um,
That pessimism and
so,
negativity breeds and
yeah,
it
just the
feeds and
world
it
is a dangerous
poisons.
place.
Yeah.
That's how we see it. That's what we're exposed to. Nobody
Yeah.
calls us, you know, at times of celebration. That's not what happens.
Yeah.
The world is dangerous because we are called at times of
Yeah.
crisis.
And I think it's really interesting too, because I noticed that you know, earlier on in my career, I worked with some way more senior members, and they were just like angry about everything. Every job was fuck this and I was
Oh,
a
yeah.
you know a baby trainee, but then I remember moving on to a different station and feeling like I almost had like a hangover of their negativity and pessimism and whatever else, and I remember kind of catching myself going like, what the fuck are you so angry about, Erin? Like why, like, you know, okay, yeah, cool, like going to a domestic, like not, you know, not your favorite job to go to, but like you haven't been to like 200, you've, you know, been to as many in like a couple of years, and it's okay. And then it was really like I didn't want to then imprint a negative attitude on then the kids that I was, well, kids, but you know, the people that I was then in charge of training as like a senior member. And I
Mm,
think that kind of comes into play too, because as much as, you know, like now I, you know, try to almost like pride myself on being a really happy, positive kind of person. And that's kind of always been like my nature, but how easily we can be like imprinted on and influenced by our colleagues. So if they're going through like a challenging time too, and all they're bringing to the table is pessimism and negativity and aggression and all that kind of thing, it's not only does it feel like you absorb it, but then I also feel like it makes it more dangerous when you're out on the road with them, because then they're unpredictable and you don't know what you're going to get with them.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think, like I sort of mentioned before, that work hard, play hard, and there was an element of needing to prove yourself to a certain level before you could be trusted and all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, I have memories of people, getting out and my colleague being incredibly angry and just going absolutely mental, on this door. And I just, and I thought, what on? And he was like, I remember in that moment he snapped. And I didn't understand at the time. I just thought he was this really angry, kind of not particularly nice to be around. I think I see him differently now. With the passage of time and the understanding of what the job can do to you. I think I see that anger as a really different representation of what I thought it was while I was standing, feeling my own heart rate kind of rise and thinking, what the fuck is going on here? It's very, I see things very, very differently, but all of that stuff, I make sure that I don't want people that I work with to feel that way. To have this kind of negative reaction. I want them to feel open and involved and part of everything, and there's no stupid question, and all of that sort of stuff. The things
part
that
of the campfire.
Campfire, that's right.
So
everyone sit down.
I love it so much. So I guess what or like how aware are you of what the process would look like? So say you felt like you were struggling with your mental health, or equally like a colleague was, like, how are you even made aware of like what that process is within the organization? Like, who do you know to reach out to? Is there like a process that's in place that, you guys are educated about it all? Or has there been since I've left or anything like that?
Yeah, there's a lot now, particularly in the space that I'm in at the moment. Welfare is an incredible piece of the puzzle, and something that we really focus on. But, when we have training days now, for example, and I think it's across the organisation for the most part, we have people from psych services come out and introduce. In some of the sex offence and child abuse teams and the family violence teams, there is often a practitioner, who's engaged to come out and meet with, well, be it in person or, on the line post COVID and that sort of stuff. But those reflective practices where, you're sort of checking in with yourself, and, certainly when I was on the sex team at prosecutions, the same sort of thing. We were checking in with a psych, albeit as a team. There's welfare packs everywhere. There are posters around the place now. That doesn't necessarily mean, I don't think, that it becomes easy to pick up the phone or it becomes easy to say I'm not coping, or but certainly there is a lot of conversation, or there's more conversation than there ever used to be around mental health, around what's available. And I think even social media now, there are so many not-for-profits as well that, are focused on raising awareness around mental health, raising awareness around first responder mental health as well. So, even if we're not necessarily in the workplace, we can find these things on social media, which, is potentially a step removed from actually being in the workplace and saying, I'm not coping. And I think, just keeping an eye on your colleagues as well, and knowing what burnout looks like for myself. I can, I notice changes in others and all that sort of stuff. So I think the conversations and the accessibility and all of that sort of stuff is much more present than it ever was. And it continues to be more present. But, are we addressing the stigma? I think that's the next as well, making it okay.
Yeah.
And it, because it is okay. And it's just it's that human reaction to what is an extraordinary set of circumstances that we find ourselves in.
And I think it is, maybe uniquely challenging in the role as a police officer that, obviously part of our job is carrying firearm. So then there would, is naturally so much stigma attached, because then if you go and say, hey, I'm struggling psychologically. I think a lot of people worry about whether they're gonna, not be able to work anymore, have the firearm taken off them, all that kind of thing. And that, I think that plays so heavily in people's like decision making. So, especially like you're saying, if there's access to things that are maybe outside of the organization itself, sometimes people feel a little bit more comfortable reaching out in that sense. And equally, even though it's a big organization, you always find that like everyone knows everyone. So I think there's always that thing of like, oh, fuck, like, is that person going to open their trap? Who do they know? Who are they going to tell? All that kind of thing. And I think it makes it that extra level, being challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it does. That stigma reaches far deep, and there's I think there's still a negative weakness, vulnerability attached, and I think sometimes our vulnerabilities are what make us the most interesting. And we all have a unique lived experience, and it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to share, and it's okay to say, you know what, that was a shit fucking day, or you know what, actually talking to that person, I sort of split my heart open.
Yeah.
That's that sense of stoicism and those qualities that have been long valued for whatever reason. I'm not necessarily sure that they connect us in a way that we need to be connected, and those attributes that we need to celebrate, authenticity, vulnerability, those things that make us human, also are what offers our ability to cope as well, and what connects to our resilience, and all of that sort of stuff. It's not just because we don't feel shit, because that's just a big fat lie.
100%.
And that shit needs to be blown wide open.
Exactly. And that is a good starting point. So we are going to have another conversation with Elise and her friend Hayley on an upcoming episode. But would you like to maybe just give like a brief overview of, clearly you're very passionate about the mental health of yourself and your colleagues and the ones that you love. What has that direction sort of drawn you into in regards to helping out?
So Hayley is, I've mentioned her already. She's, one of my very best friend in the world. We met very early doors. We're only about 3 months apart in terms of our policing careers, and we've known each other for, that makes at least 17 years. She is now retired ill health, and her story is incredible, and her lived experience of harm is incredible. As a result of being retired ill health, she found yoga, and I sort of reconnected with yoga in a deeper way that I hadn't before, and as such we're both yoga teachers.
That's amazing.
Last year we became yoga teachers. And we're also certified in trauma-informed, trauma-aware yoga teaching, which is a really different element of what we traditionally picture yoga to be, which is perfect pretzel bodies, filtered, amazing, bent in half.
You clearly have not seen me ever do yoga.
Yoga is so much more than what we see plastered across social media. It's so much more than what we've westernized it to be. But yeah, Hayley and I, teach yoga. She currently has a 10-week program that she's delivering to first responders. That's that she's been able to secure with the assistance of yoga on the inside, predominantly. So yeah, we're just finding a way to bring yoga to first responders in a way that resonates with their bodies and their nervous systems, and through that trauma-informed lens. And
wow,
it's something that is, just connects with the body in a way that if you haven't tried yoga, you might be a little bit surprised. But, that's a whole conversation for a whole nother day. Hayley's perspective as well.
And we will delve into that. I just kind of wanted to just hear
Yeah.
about it really briefly, and you should see the way that your face lights up when you talk about that.
It's delicious. Yes. Yes, I
Oh,
do. And I have a meditation practice as well.
okay.
But yeah, Haley and I will just continue to, sort of, it's just an incredible journey. And it's, I think I needed a perspective outside of the organisation and outside of policing, and yoga has certainly brought a different perspective. In terms of deep diving into that side of life. So it's been amazing. It's something I really
that sounds
connect
brilliant.
with.
And so do you guys solely just teach first responders, or
no, not solely, but at the moment, that's sort of where our focus is. Haley's passion is being retired ill health. I shouldn't speak for her, actually. That's not very fair. But yeah, we're going into the first responder world because we think that's where it's needed. But, wouldn't limit, certainly absolutely wouldn't limit, just bring yoga to whoever needs it, really, and whoever wants to try it. But yeah, I think offering it to first responders is something that there might be some barriers there that, we need to work around, but
I think it's really I think it's a really important thing to do, because like you're saying, like it's the lens that you're coming at it through is obviously so different that, maybe people in our roles are going to get something out of it that they never anticipated, and it's just about, giving it a try. And I'm sure if you offer like a copper discount, they will be in the door, because all coppers love a discount.
Correct. Well, part of it is volunteering the time as well.
Yeah.
Because it's something that is so important, and it's something that once you sort of start with it, you can do it at home without too much effort. Do you know what I mean? So in terms of volunteering and giving back, I think it's those things connect with us as well. And if you've got something that's going to help, then you shouldn't hold on to it and keep it a secret. I think it should be shared, and people should have the opportunity to experience something in their body.
No, that sounds absolutely brilliant, and I can't wait to have that conversation with both you and Haley together to hear more about it and the origins of it and how it's going. So I look forward to that. So we are about to wrap it up. This has been wonderful. Just have a couple of questions before we finish off. So, like we have sort of already, I think, discussed sort of like, on and off through our conversation here today. The name of the podcast is I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. And that has come from kind of like my promise to, my first responder coaching clients, and kind of like the ethos that I like to go by is that, I think that darkness permeates our first responder and emergency services role. Like we've discussed here today, it's, we see the complete underbelly and the depths of humanity, and what people are capable of doing to each other, and that in turn can impact us so deeply. So I like to end each podcast with asking my new friend, although you're an old friend.
We've done a new platform.
Exactly right. So asking you, so number one, what, and you may have already given this answer sort of, throughout our conversation, but what do you do to hold space for your darkness? Like, what helps you cope with the things that you see, and, especially in your role with being such like an advocate for your family violence victims and all that kind of thing. And like I said, you may have already said it, but if you had to pick sort of like one thing, what's the thing that helps you hold space for your own darkness?
For me, yoga, like we've just spoken about, yoga and meditation is something that I find gives me more capacity in the day, in my emotions. It just seems to allow me, when I practice it daily, to go further, to just have more capacity in the day, more capacity for myself, more capacity for others. But similarly, I've also been learning, within myself over the last few years, that there's no shame in feeling what you feel. So actually allowing myself to be impacted by something, or allowing, somebody's story of harm, allowing myself to feel that rather than to be cut off from it, and letting that work through my system. Those are things that I think help me sort of maybe pass through the darkness as opposed to get stuck in it necessarily. That doesn't mean that it's easy per se. It's an established practice, and it's something that I need to come back to. And it's, if I stop, I know, I then notice, I have awareness around, look out, that's sort of, it's becoming dark, or all those clouds are closing in, or, whatever that looks like. So then I reset myself.
Well, that's wonderful that you've found something that works so well for you. That's brilliant. Thank you for sharing. And the final question before I let you go, because I've talked your ear off for a while now, is alternatively, what is something that like a loved one can do to support you and hold space for your darkness? Like, I know that like your partner is in the job. Do you think that helps, given, they then have like that level of understanding, or, what like friends and family do? Like, what's sort of that main thing that someone in your life that you love, whether it's a family member or your partner, can do for you, that's going to help you the most, and hold space for your darkness on like a really challenging day?
Yeah, there's a few different things, I think. Absolutely, having a partner in the job is helpful. Like we've talked about, that you don't have to go into the details. You can just sort of utter a few words, and the impact is conveyed. So I think that's helpful, because we're so on. We're so on all day. But sometimes when you get home, the holding space is, I just can't talk to you right now. And it's got nothing to do with you. It's got nothing, you know what I mean? But I just can't be on right now. I need to not be engaging. And then similarly to my own sort of, what I do for myself is just letting the feelings be worked through, even if they're overt, even if it's crying and sobbing, or, that sort of anger, just letting that be worked through, don't try and fix it. There's no need to fix it. There's no need to stop it. It needs to be moved through, but just being able to sit with that discomfort of seeing me emotional, or seeing me silent, or seeing me angry, or something like that, and just knowing that doesn't have anything to do. It's not a reflection of you. It's not necessarily even a reflection of me per se. It's just a reflection of what the day's been, what the week.
Yeah. That makes total sense. And I think it's something that, like we said, like you hear a lot about when they're in the job or another first responder role, and that level of understanding, it really plays and can be like a really significant part of your relationship.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Like it's a lot though, right? It takes constant awareness. Takes
a special bloke.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Elise, for your time today. I really enjoyed this chat, and I hope the listeners have really enjoyed, hearing about Elise's background and experiences. And this has been I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I am Erin Jane. Please feel free to reach out either via Instagram, Erin Jane Coaching, or you can reach out on this episode and just let us know what you think. And if you have any questions, send them through. All right. Thanks for your time, Elise. Take care.
Thank you, Erin. See you soon.
Bye.